What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Cards and Coffee. On today's deck talk, we're digging into another top tier contender for the format right now. And personally, I think this deck is pretty amazing. Invoked Dogmatika has been a very strong deck ever since the release of Rise of the Duelist, being a very unique deck that revolves around fusion summoning, all while abusing an engine that actually requires you to stop going to your extra deck. Personally, the Dogmatika archetype is one of my favorite archetypes to have come out in quite some time. Whether it's a small package you put in the main deck or a heavy lineup that you try to pump your deck full of, the Dogmatika engine just adds an amazing layer to any one of your extra deck based decks. And yes, I know Alistair has been around for quite some time now, to the point where it's basically a meme, but one thing that has always been true in this game is one card starters not only are consistent, but if it's strong enough, it could definitely dominate a meta. We're going to go through the card by card, show you exactly what I'd play if I were taking this deck to a remote duel or maybe a locals this weekend. With the release of Burst of Destiny, this is another deck that gets to abuse Destroy Phoenix Enforcer. The card is so insane and so splashable. Any deck that can play it most likely should. Like I mentioned earlier, this deck has had a lot of success in the past and is going to continue to have success as long as it gets more cards to add to the engine. DPE is an insanely powerful card, and normal summoning Alistair has never felt so good. In the end, I'll show you a couple combos, one that's been around for a little while, and another one that involves DPE. But first, as always, guys, please go grab yourself a cup of coffee or something. That way you guys can sit down and tune in. Thanks, guys. So really quickly, I just wanted to say this deck basically plays the same as it's always played, having access to Alistair, guaranteeing one fusion a turn, while giving you Omni Negates or Pops, or potentially different ways to lock your opponent out of playing the game. The Invoked engine has been a very tried and true engine that not only has a lot of strength and consistency, but of course an amazing grind game. When you mix it with the Dogmatika engine, it just gives you another layer of interruption, another layer of aggression, and of course an insanely easy way to access El Shaddoll window. Personally, I am a huge fan of Shaddolls, and this variant doesn't play very many Shaddoll cards in the main deck. I'm actually going to save that for a different build in the future, so comment down below if that's something you actually want to see. But right now, this build leans a lot harder towards the Invoked engine and the Dogmatika engine, focusing on consistency, interruptions, and of course, getting access to Destroy Phoenix Enforcer pretty much as soon as you can. Starting things off with the monsters, of course, it wouldn't be an Invoked deck without 3 copies of Alistair the Invoker. Alistair, obviously being the heart and soul of your main fusion plays, stands up to be the star of the deck. In case you guys don't know what he does, on normal summon you can add 1 invocation from your deck to your hand, and in addition it has an in-hand effect where during either player's turn you can discard him to increase one of your fusion monsters' attack and defense by 1,000. So not only is it like a Colute for your fusions, but invocation is your main fusion spell, not only giving you access to your fusions, but using its effect to recycle Alistair every turn. Makes for one of the most simple, efficient, and effective engines in the game right now. After Alistair, we move on to the Dogmatika engine. I am on 3 copies of Dogmatika Ecclesia. Just like Alistair, this is one of your main searchers in the deck. She has a couple effects, and they're all really amazing. The most important one being on normal or special summon, you can add any Dogmatika card from your deck to hand, but if you do, you cannot go into the extra deck for the rest of the turn. If ever there's a monster on the field that is special summoned from the extra deck, you can special summon her from your hand freely. So I think it's pretty straightforward. You'll normal summon an Alistair, you'll get a fusion play going. Now you'll control a fusion, so you can special Ecclesia from your hand, get a search, and now you don't need to worry about going to the extra deck because, well, you already fusion summoned. She also has another effect that it cannot be destroyed by battle by monsters that are special summoned from the extra deck, and while it's not the most crazy effect, you'd be surprised how many times your opponent actually forgets about that effect. Another cool thing to keep in mind is the effect to special summon it from the hand does not lock you out of the extra deck. It's only when you decide to search a card that you'll get locked out of the extra deck. So keep that in mind for some of the combos later. For the 2 monster targets that Ecclesia searches in the deck, we are on 1 copy of Dogmatika Fleur-de-Lis and 1 copy of Dogmatika Maximus. Fleur-de-Lis is essentially your effect veiler of the deck, being able to special summon itself, non-targeting, negate one of your opponent's monster effects, and of course, whenever your Dogmatikas battle, it can increase all their attacks by 500. Dogmatika Maximus is probably one of the riskiest cards to play, but the reward is definitely worth it. You can special summon it from the hand by banishing an extra deck monster from your graveyard, and then once per turn, you can activate the effect that will make you and your opponent both send 2 monsters from your extra deck to the graveyard. Now, yes, this is pretty cool because you're taking resources away from your opponent, but the main reason we're doing this is to trigger all the effects from any of the monsters we send from our extra deck to the graveyard, such as the Shaddolls, maybe Natis, Omega, you name it. Whatever you need to hit the graveyard and have their effect activate, Maximus is a powerhouse at accomplishing that. Now, one thing to keep in mind that is a little risky about it is if your opponent is playing stuff like Natis or maybe even a Cyber Dragon Nova, so they can special summon a Mikaba from the extra deck, then yeah, you can kind of get punished pretty hard if you activate this effect. So this is definitely one of the risks you have to assess when building and playing the deck, but just know there are other first turn combos you can do without feeling obligated to having to go into Maximus first turn. For the last package we're playing, we are playing the 1 Destiny Hero Celestial and the 1 Destiny Hero Dasher. Like I mentioned earlier, DPE is one of the best cards in the format right now, and this is definitely one of the best decks that can abuse it, so you better believe we're definitely going to play it. The beautiful thing about this deck is the monster lineup is pretty small, so you have so much space in your deck to just cram it full of any tech cards, hand traps, board breakers, you name it. Whatever you want or whatever you think you might need for a tournament, this deck can easily find room to fit whatever you need. And that's one of the reasons I love this deck. 1 card starters, simple, easy consistency, and a deck teched out for whatever meta it might run into. Right now, I am on a boatload of hand traps, just because not only do I think it's good to stop your opponent from playing the game, but when you make your first turn board and you have hand traps in your hand, even if your opponent has something like Dark Ruler or Droplets to stop your board, you know with all the hand traps you packed in your deck, you still have a lot of interruption to fall back on that your opponent just can't touch. For the first hand trap, we are playing 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joy Spring. Obviously, just one of the most generic hand traps in the game right now, so you definitely want to max out on this one, especially since we're basically playing as many hand traps as we can fit right now. After Ash Blossom, I am playing 3 copies of Nibiru, the Primal Being. This is probably the highest impact hand trap in the deck, and while sometimes your opponent can play around it, if you have other hand traps in your hand, your opponent is gonna naturally play into Nibiru, trying to play through those other hand traps, so it's so easy to punish your opponent. I will say though, the one thing about Nibiru that can be a little awkward is once you got the DPE engine going, there are times in matchups where Nibiru doesn't get activated or just sits in your hand, so resolving the Celestial effect in your grave can be a little awkward, but that's really not the biggest deal in this specific deck because, again, Nibiru is a light, so as long as you have your Alistair engine online, you can always easily use it to fusion summon into your #1 fusion, Invoked Mikaba. After Nibiru, I am playing another light hand trap, and it's actually not Effect Veiler. I am on 3 main deck copies of Artifact Lancia. Yes, this isn't the most generic hand trap right now, but with all the top decks running around right now, Lancia affects 95% of them. Phantom Knights will have their turn skipped, Tri-Brigade can't use any of their monster effects, Virtual World basically can't search, hell, Tangy Sword Soul can't even use half their deck. Now, of course, if your opponent's playing Sword Soul and not playing the Tangies, then yeah, this card could be a little bad against them, but other than that instance, Lancia is a really amazing card against all the top decks in the format right now. Even in the mirror match, you can stop Invocation, so Lancia has been testing very amazingly. After the Lancia, I am also on 2 main deck copies of Droll and Lockbird. This deck doesn't really OTK out of nowhere, so I don't want to rely on Droll and Lockbird to skip my opponent's turn if I really can't capitalize on it, but buying 1 turn here and there does definitely help, especially when you're trying to get your engine going, but drawing multiples of this card is kind of frustrating in this deck. And after the Droll and Lockbird, we have 1 more hand trap, 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. Obviously, Impermanence is pretty much in everybody's main deck these days. I'm sure you've heard me talk about it a bunch of times in other deck talks, but even though this card doesn't have an attribute to fusion summon with, this is still one of the best hand traps in the game. So that's it for the hand traps, and in case you weren't counting, that was 14 in the main deck. Now, I believe 13 cards is the magic number in a 40 card deck when you're trying to see 2 hand traps in your opening hand. So if you want to fit something else in the deck, you could definitely cut one, but you know what? The more the merrier. Moving on to the spells, we are of course on 3 copies of Destiny Fusion. Not only do we have Anaconda in the extra deck to access this, but obviously hard drawing this card to follow up your combos with makes for a very insane card in the deck. Now, I will say though, this is the only deck that does have some contradictions with this spell, where there is going to be times where you're stuck between deciding whether or not to resolve Fusion Destiny or resolving a Dogmatika card like Ecclesia. More times than not, you'll either do one or the other, or of course after the first turn normally you'll go into the other half of the engine. That way both engines are going. After the Fusion Destiny, of course, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Nadir Servant. This is one of the strongest cards in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. Sending an extra deck monster to the grave to search a Dogmatika monster not only sets up a bunch of combos, but gives you so many options on how you approach your turn. There's never a world where not playing 3 of this. This is hands down the best searcher in your deck. And speaking of searchers, of course, we are on 3 copies of Magical Meltdown, one of the strongest field spells in the game today. On activation, you can add Alistair, and of course, while it's on the field, your opponent can't negate the card effects that will fusion summon a card, and of course, they cannot respond to the summon of a fusion monster as well. This makes for an insane consistency card and an amazing way to break boards and kind of block your opponent out of being able to react to whatever you're trying to do. Now, since Meltdown is such an amazing card for the deck, we're obviously playing the 1 Terraforming, essentially giving you 7 copies of Alistair in your deck. And of course, not only that, but we do play 1 copy of Mystic Mine. In a simplified game state, this card can be very good in your deck, and of course, it's just a great going second card to bait out any negates or any interruptions your opponent might have. Now, I haven't shown it yet, but of course, we are playing Invocation, and right now, I am on 1 copy. We aren't playing Desires, so I'm not worried about banishing it. And really right now, the only time Invocation can get stuck in your graveyard is maybe if your opponent has Lancia. But we do play a solution to that problem in the extra deck. But just know, you can play 2 of this if you want to be safe. But for me, I found 1 copy is really all you need. After the Invocation, we are playing 1 Called by the Grave. Again, just another way to stop hand traps and just really help your Alistair or your Ecclesia resolve. Phoenix Enforcer is an amazing card, and I've probably said it 100 times already this episode, so having a card like this to just answer it while it's in the grave also is another thing that makes Called by the Grave so amazing. And for the last spell card in the deck, I am on 1 copy of Cosmic Cyclone. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Justin, that's a little random, but the main reason we play this card is because it's a Mystic Mine out, and there are other cards we could play that theoretically also out Mystic Mine, but the reason why I think Cosmic Cyclone is the best is because not only can you set it and use it defensively, but even going second, this is an answer to so many cards in the meta. You could hit stuff like Blackout, Virtual World Chuche, maybe even some Fog Blades, but most importantly, Cosmic Cyclone is another amazing card to help prevent Artifact Scythe from hitting the field, chaining Cosmic Cyclone in response to DPE, preventing it from being destroyed, and of course summoning itself. Makes for an amazing tech card that really I'm surprised more people don't play. That's it for the spells. Moving on to the traps. You already know we had the 3 Infinite Impermanents, but after that we are of course playing the 1 Dogmatika Punishment and the 1 Shadal Schism. Whether you're destroying multiple cards on your opponent's field or summoning Winda to lock your opponent out of special summoning, these trap cards are truly amazing. So that was it for the main deck. We're going to hop over to the extra deck. But first, in case you guys didn't know, I have been hosting a progression series with a good friend of mine, Ricardo. Our series has been so insane with all the staples we've had access to. Not only do we have some crazy lucky pulls from time to time, but the inclusion of starter decks to our series makes it to where our meta has definitely been playing out a lot closer to what Yu-Gi-Oh! Really played like back in the day. If you haven't checked it out already, please go check it out. I have a playlist somewhere. And not only that, but at the time of recording this, we're literally a handful of people away from 1,000 subscribers. It was just a few months ago when I started this channel, and to see that it's come so far so fast, I am truly thankful to all you guys who have subscribed and joined the squad. And of course, to all you guys who haven't joined yet, please consider it. I really appreciate the support. Now, moving on to the extra deck, we play 3 Link monsters, 1 Salamangreat Almirage, 1 Secure Gardna, and 1 Predaplant Verte Anaconda. Obviously, these 2 are for Alistair, just being able to normal summon them, search your fusion spell, link it off for Almirage, and then link the Almirage off into Secure Gardna, giving you a fire or a light to decide what you want to fusion summon into you. For the life of me, I could not fit the fire fusion Purgatrio into my deck, so in theory, I could cut the Salamangreat, but I really think Almirage is super important, not only for the fusion play, but it puts a Link monster in the graveyard. That way you can set up Maximus first turn very easily. After that, of course, the Verte, just super staple for any one of these fusion decks, and getting access to DPE is very easy because of this card. After that, we play a bunch of fusions. Of course, first things first, the 1 Destiny Hero, Destroy Phoenix Enforcer. This card is running amok right now in the meta, so if your deck can play it, you definitely want to try to make the room. After the Enforcer, we have a good little Invoked package. 2 Makaba is the number that I'm playing right now. After that, we play the 1 Agoides. This card is obviously really amazing, and while it's not always the easiest one to get access to, it's definitely one of the more powerful ones. I do play 2 more Invoked Fusion monsters, 1 copy of Ragin, and then the 1 Kaliga. Rajin's really nice because, again, we main deck Droll and Lockbird, plus there's a lot of wins in the game right now. Invoke Kaliga is definitely a flex slot. This is another card you could cut for a Purgatrio, but the main reason I am playing it right now is the Destiny Hero package is running around in so many decks right now. Being able to activate Invocation and banish a material from your opponent's graveyard that's a Dark, DPE, or Celestial makes for an amazing tech slot in your extra deck just to give you the option to do that. Not only that, but Kaliga also has just an amazing Floodgate effect, locking your opponent into 1 monster effect a turn. After that, we're on the Shaddoll package, the 1 App Cologne to add the Schism and then dump the Schism, the 1 Construct to then add the Schism back to hand, and of course the 1 Winda, the main card we're trying to go into with this package. Locking your opponent out of special summoning is a crazy mechanic that can be really oppressive. After the Shaddolls, I am playing 2 more fusion monsters, 1 Elder Entity Natis. Whenever it's sent to the grave, you can pop a card, so whether you're dumping it with Punishment or Nadir or even Maximus, this card is very easy to get its effect off. Lastly, after that, we have the 1 Titaniclad. We're never summoning this, but in the end phase of the turn, it's sent to the grave. You can either special summon or add a Dogmatika monster, so this is just one way to get multiple Dogmatika searches in a turn, or maybe you just didn't have good access to the Dogmatikas, and this is just getting you a follow-up or a combo starter for the next turn. That's it for the fusions, and that's it for the links, but the last monster we're playing in the extra deck is a Synchro monster, 1 copy of Psyframe Lord Omega. I opted out of playing Gamma this week, even though that's an amazing card right now, but the main reason we decided to play this card is, once again, it's another card you can put in the graveyard, and its grave effect is really amazing. If ever it's in the grave, you can target itself and any other card in the graveyard and shuffle it back into the deck. So not only does this deal with cards in your opponent's graveyard that might be used as follow-up for the next turn, but if ever your opponent did stop your invocation plays, you can just use Omega's effect to put the 1 invocation from your grave back into the deck. That way the next time you normal summon Alistair, you have something to search again. There are 100 different tech options for the main deck or for the extra deck, really, and that's really what makes this deck so good. I'm sure there's a bunch of you guys out there that are on this deck as well, so comment down below what tech cards and what hand traps are you trying to play right now to give you that much more of an edge against the meta. Alright guys, I'm going to show you 2 of the bread and butter plays this deck can do. The deck is pretty straightforward, and this first combo I'm going to show you has been done 100 times before in other formats, but I figured I'd run through this combo as a refresher, and it'll help me segue into the second combo as well. So for this first combo, all you really need is a way to get to Alistair and a way to get to Ecclesia. Opening Nadir Servant and Meltdown is actually the best way. It plays into Droll, but as far as card value goes and overall power, this is the ideal 2-card combo. So starting things off, the first thing we'll do is activate Magical Meltdown, activating the effect to search your deck for an Alistair the Invoker. Now immediately after that, of course, we're going to do what this deck does best, normal summon Alistair and activate the effect, searching the deck for a copy of Invocation, then immediately after link off the Alistair into your Almirage, just to immediately after link this off into your Secure Gardna. Now you got a light, you got your Alistair, you can activate Invocation Invocation, banishing the Secure Gardener and banishing the Alistair from grave. Fusion summoning a copy of Makaba from the extra deck. I prefer to put it in defense just because some decks are main decking Lightning Storm right now. After the summon, you can activate the Invocation, putting it back into the deck to add the Alistair back to your hand for a free negate or follow-up for the next turn. Then, of course, the next thing we'll do, activate the Nadir Servant, sending an Apkallone to the grave to search Ecclesia to hand. Apkallone's effect will activate, adding the Schism just to dump the Schism. Then, of course, you control an extra deck monster, so you can special summon the Ecclesia, activating the effect to search the Maximus to hand. Since I don't need the fire, I'm just going to go ahead and banish it for the Maximus, summoning it to the field in defense. And, of course, we're going to activate the Maximus effect, sending one Titaniclad and one Construct to the grave. Now, Construct's effect will activate. You'll get to add the Schism back to your hand. And immediately after that, you'll set one, and you'll pass. End phase, your Titaniclad will activate, and you can add yourself either some follow-up, or you can even add Fleur de Lis. So you'll have a negate with Makaba, you'll have an effect negate with Fleur de Lis, and whenever you're ready, you can activate the Schism to banish your 2 from the graveyard and fusion summon Winda to the field. Again, this combo is nothing revolutionary, nothing brand new to the deck, but I figured I'd show you guys in case you haven't seen it before, and it kind of leads into the next combo. Alright, so for this next combo, all you really need is access to Alistair and, of course, a Ecclesia. If you open Nadir, it's going to lock you out of the extra deck, so it doesn't really work with Nadir Servant. So hard opening Ecclesia is really the best way to do this combo. So we'll jump into this combo. Just know this is actually what I prefer to do game 1 if I can, because sometimes activating Maximus game 1 is kind of risky when you're doing it blind. So first things first, we'll normal summon the Alistair, activating effect to once again search the Invocation. Immediately after, we will link it off again into the copy of Almirage. And after that, instead of making your Secure Gardener, we're just going to special summon the Ecclesia to the field. You're not going to use the effect because it'll lock you out of the extra deck, but what it does is it gets you a light body that you can use to link summon. After you summon it, you will immediately link them both off into one of the best link 2s in the game right now, Predaplant, Verte, Anaconda. Now you have your Alistair and your Light Engrave. We'll activate Invocation, banishing both from the graveyard, fusion summoning Makaba to the field, and then immediately after putting the Invocation back and adding the Alistair back to hand. Now you got your Makaba, you got your Alistair for next turn. We can activate Verte's effect, paying 2,000 life points to dump the fusion, and then of course the effect will resolve and you'll dump 2 heroes from the deck. Phoenix Enforcer now hits the field, and you didn't have to Maximus, and you don't get your Dogmatika engine online, but you still have your negate, you still have a quick effect pop, you'll have 3 other cards in hand alongside your Alistair, and you'll have Pot of Greed engraved for whenever your hand does empty out. Again, the Winda seems to be a little bit more powerful turn 1, but there's a lot of people maining stuff like Natis and even Makaba and Cyber Dragon Nova, so going into game 1 blind, it's actually a safer play to make this first turn move rather than blindly Maximusing on your first turn, because honestly it could just straight lose you the game. So that's it for the combos I wanted to show you guys today. Again, the deck is really straightforward, really simple, and really consistent. And that's most likely why this deck has had so much success recently. I am a firm believer that with the right pilot, and if you correctly tech your deck out for the meta, this deck can compete with anything that you could possibly run into. That's all the time I have for today, guys. Thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate all the support. At the time of filming this, I'm just below 1,000 subscribers, but who knows? Maybe by the time I post this, I'm already there. So if you guys are subscribed, thank you guys so much for the support. I remember when I was sitting around with 12 subscribers for multiple weeks, so all the love and all the support from all you guys has been greatly appreciated. Here's hoping to see you guys next time. Peace.